I'm Riaz Phillips. I'm the writer and photographer of Belly Full Caribbean Food in the UK, which is a new book that explores Caribbean culture in the UK through the guise of food. So I grew up between North and East London. So my parents lived in Archway, my grandparents lived in Hackney and Edmonton. So I kind of grew up in all those types of places that had a strong Caribbean community. And naturally growing up, my grandparents are from the Caribbean, Jamaica and St. Vincent. So the influences were always in our household. The music, the food is always part of our life. So growing up, it was just second nature. So it was until I kind of grew up and went into the outside world that I realized that other people kind of came from different backgrounds, and our background was quite alien to a lot of people, even though I'd been in this country for so long. So I kind of just set about a way to try and explore my own heritage and pick a way to essentially illustrate it to other people. So essentially, I live in South London now, so that's where I started off, as a similar Afro-Caribbean background to where I'm from up in East London. So I literally just went from shop to shop asking if I could speak to the owner or manager or head chef, whoever would give me time just to explore and interview them. And when you get into something like the food business, everybody knows everyone. So for instance, when I started, I went to J.B.'s in Peckham, and he gets his meat from Dennis's Butchers, which is just down the road. So he sent me there, and then I went to Dennis's Butchers. He's like, "Oh, you need to check this man Wenty in Forest Gate, East London. He'll be a good person to chat to." And then you go there, and then he tells you something, and it's so on and so forth. So that's how I just got started. I just went on a bike, went around, and with my camera and a notepad, just kind of got into it. So the real pattern of the book, if you look at it at a deeper level, I actually traced around places where there had been like political riots or upheavals, places that kind of were real points of interest to Caribbean communities. So you got like Toxteth in Liverpool, Moss Side in Manchester, Lozells in Birmingham. Yeah, these are all places that have been like really like pivotal to Caribbean communities in the UK. And lo and behold, there's food places in all of them that are really important to communities, where the communities kind of huddle and gather. So these are all things that I kind of wanted to illustrate and depict. So Caribbean food is really interesting. When you look at its roots and foundations, you realise that it kind of traces what the Caribbean is, which is a mishmash of so many different cultures and so many different nationalities and ethnicities, which really makes it an interesting cuisine. Not to say it's more interesting than other cuisines, but just in terms of its background, its political, economic, social history of the food. It's fascinating. It's got kind of Asian influences, especially on the Trinidad side of the Caribbean, when you had like indentured workers coming over to work in those islands. It's got English background heritage. When you're looking at hardo bread and buns, things like that have always been like traditional Easter foods that they have in the Caribbean. Then of course you've got the African heritage in the Caribbean, which is undeniable. Things like rice and peas and ackee, which Caribbean people like swear it's theirs. Their ownership over it is actually has a lot of like West African roots to it. Like akkee's from West Africa. And then beyond that, things like saltfish, they got claims that they're from Europe, and codfish being from Europe. So when you look at this whole mishmash, it makes for an interesting food dialogue, especially when you look at conversations of ownership and food, and who owns food and who can do what in food. When you kind of consider that it has such a like vivid background, it really questions who owns it and who has the credence to be able to do it. So I found that all quite interesting. So I guess looking at the popularity of Caribbean food, just from chatting to people, as I've been doing for the last few years, it seems there's kind of a real myriad of reasons why it's not as popular. Some business, some social. A lot of people seem to think that there wasn't that much unity within the community in terms of like business unity, economy, taking advantage of economies of scale, which is what has been kind of replicated in a lot of other cultures and their food and their kind of economic base in this country, being able to kind of take advantage of that and serve food at a cheap way. But beyond that, I kind of find that Caribbean food is amongst the few foods in UK, that when you go to the original place of where it's from, it is what it is in the UK. So kind of what you see in UK Caribbean eateries, when you go back to the Caribbean, even though they might have kind of a greater product base to deal with, so they might get more kind of intricacies. Essentially, you get here what you get back there, whereas when you look at Chinese food, when you go to China, you look at kind of Singapore noodles, Singapore's not even in China, special fried rice, when you kind of go to these places, they look at you like you're mad because it's not from there. It's these kind of weird UK, European mishmash dishes that have happened in this country over the years. The same with a lot of kind of Southeast Asian dishes. A lot of them have kind of been fabricated for a UK European market, which is something that hasn't been done in kind of Caribbean cuisine, and something that's never really been attempted, because as I said, these recipes are really important to people, what they mean, and the food is really important in their heritage, and it's not something that a lot of people have been willing to kind of compromise in terms of selling and making sales. I think that's another reason why it's been slow to take off in other foods have over the years in the UK. The main bulk of the project was about 1.5 years, which was the travelling around and kind of waiting for people to get back to me, doing the writing, editing the photos, all that type of thing. And then the latter 6 months was kind of a result of me choosing to self-publish. It's the kind of setback I had at the time was dealing with, not necessarily dealing with agents, but just dealing with the time and kind of slow nature of that type of process, and waiting for answers and having to deal with a lot of gatekeepers, kind of beholden to other people's time frames and their decision and their whim when you're on that. It's not to kind of say I was on a pedestal where I thought I was beyond any type of publishing process, but for me, I find especially within the Black community, when we're always kind of asking for opportunity from other people, especially people outside the community, when we have such a big financial resource within our own community, I don't think it makes much sense to wait around and sit around for other people to be given the opportunity, even though you don't get the same type of mass exposure, unfortunately, that you get when you work with a big publisher. For me, it was always fine if I worked on a smaller kind of metric, if I could hit the kind of audience I wanted to hit and just reach the types of people I wanted to reach. And then beyond that, just even putting a book in the British Library, in the Radcliffe Camera Library, Bodleian in Oxford, even that was a small win, that you don't need a big publisher to be able to do that. So seeing the reaction of kind of my grandparents' generation and seeing them see images of themselves and people similar to them in a book is something that's quite new and quite alien to them. So it's been amazing to see their feedback and seeing their response to the book. And then beyond that, it's been really amazing to kind of have feedback from, as I said, people outside the community who have a real interest in learning about something that they see as part of the heritage of the country that's not alien, it's not different from their experience, but it's just something within it that they want to learn a bit more about. So yeah, seeing their response to it has been really amazing as well. Yeah, so I guess in terms of having the final product, it's been really illuminating in terms of just being being an item of evidence that says that me, not just me, but anyone who's from where I'm from, or anyone who's a similar background, or anyone who's attempting to do something on an independent scale, is not a dream, but it's just something that's very real and very humanizing. So that's been the main thing, is not just the effect that it's had for me, but other people who've reached out to me, because for them to see someone similar to them doing something that they've always wanted to do, it makes it very real. And beyond that, kind of founding Tazetta Press, which is the publishing company that I used to put out the book, it means I always have an umbrella to be able to put out similar projects or similar ideas that have a real similar foundation to this product.